opinions are cool. As a concept, I mean, not just all opinions. I've heard some opinions that are abhorrent, and I've also heard some that are pretty tame. Opinions can change, and that's a good thing. They should change. Whether it's new evidence or a difference in perspective as you grow older, your opinions should never remain static, as if they have, you've stopped growing as a person. What's this got to do with MGS? Well, my opinion for the longest time was that I would love to get into the series, but I just couldn't stand playing them. This was after getting roughly halfway through MGS1 and, while not hating it, slowly growing more frustrated with it over time. As I said though, I would love to get into the series, and tastes of course change as you grow older. So with it being a few years since I jumped into MGS, I decided to give Metal Gear Solid 2 a try through the recently released Master Collection, and I couldn't believe it. I was sitting there, in my room, getting invested in the story, wanting to know what happens next and thinking to myself, Metal Gear Solid 2 is amazing. I already made a video about its fantastic opening, and some of my analysis here will be a slight retread of that video. I will be spoiling the entirety of Metal Gear Solid 2 in both gameplay and story, and I recommend playing it for yourself before watching this video. But let's sneak our way through Big Shell to discover how I fell in love with Metal Gear Solid 2: Sons of Liberty. It's well known by now that after the release of MGS1, Kojima was planning on moving on to other projects. However, seeing that Konami was going to make more anyway, he felt that he couldn't leave his project behind to be taken on by other people just yet. This actually became a running theme for all of the Metal Gear Solid games post-1. This game focuses a lot more on a theme rather than a literal narrative. I still haven't got it straight in my head, but the broad strokes are talking about information, how it gets distorted, AI systems, and what people choose to do with free will. I think. I'm not entirely certain. For being completely honest, the whole ending portion of this game probably went way over my head. Especially the final scene with Raiden and Rose, but I'll get back to all of that soon. For now, let's stick to the development. The game nearly didn't come out at all, since it's set in Manhattan and came out in 2001, only a couple of months after the 9/11 attacks. When Kojima saw the World Trade Center get hit, he was apparently shocked, seeing the plot of his game play out before him, and wanted it cancelled immediately. But his team, and Konami's higher-ups, managed to convince him to just edit and tweak sections of the game and release it anyway. Kojima had so many ideas for this game that never eventually made it in due to the limits of the PS2's hardware, and even without all those cut features, the game still pushes the limits. One of my favourite examples being the rain and wind effects during the outdoor portion of the tanker chapter. The effect is so convincing, because of all the different layers of effects and the slight reflectiveness that surfaces have, that the PS2 would have had to render in real time with another model of Snake. The jump from PS1 to PS2 is drastic. The amount of detail in models and environments is unreal compared to the first game. I mean, I can actually see Snake's face rather than the rough idea of one. All the pre-release marketing would lead players to believe that the game wouldn't be much different to MGS1. Solid Snake would be sneaking into a new complex to find someone he has some kind of connection with and stop a new Metal Gear from falling into the wrong hands. But instead we got a plot following Raiden unravel his whole understanding of who he is and what he does, while trying to wrap his head around contradicting orders from different people and stopping several Metal Gears. Like I say, a lot of the plot toward the end goes over my head of what actually went on. This game has a really nice message at the end though about not getting bogged down in details like what was real or fake, but letting our emotions during our experience define how we process it. And I agree with that. I've played some games that are technically unpolished or repetitive, and that many people have laid valid criticism against, but instead of letting that define my experience, I just let myself enjoy the emotional experience anyway, as you should as well. Even if I criticise your favourite game, I can't take away your emotional experience of enjoyment, and that's really fucking cool. Diving into the gameplay rather than the themes, it's really fun. A lot slower than what I'm used to, but I enjoyed the change of pace. Similar to when I played Dishonored, I tried to get caught as little as possible and not kill if possible, meaning I use the M9 quite a lot. Part of my problem with the original MGS is a lack of methods for non-lethally taking out guards, at least that I could find. Meanwhile in MGS2 we can either choke them out, hold them up, shoot them with the M9's tranq darts, melee them, there's a whole heap of options. Also it felt like, despite the environments being way tighter in design, I could see more of what was around me and guards didn't suddenly appear from off screen and see me. Overall the game felt a lot more fair than MGS1. One of the biggest contributions to this new fairness is the addition of first-person aiming mode. In the first game you could look around in first person, but now we can use this view to aim weapons, making targets a lot easier to hit as the third-person aiming can be finicky as hell. It also allows us to take in more details about our environments. Along with this, the controls have a feeling to them that I've never been able to find in any other game. Controls are not overly tight, but they're also not floaty. It's really hard to describe. Running, for example. When you run in MGS2, you move immediately when you push the stick, and if you let go, you'll stop immediately. This would suggest that the control is super tight, but when actually moving around and changing the direction you're facing, the character almost gains a certain amount of momentum that's not felt directly through the controls, but instead through the visual output of the animations themselves. This extends into most actions performed throughout the game as well. If you switch from third to first person, the camera swings in for about a second into Snake or Raiden's head, but it keeps the momentum that was gained while the player was running around. Just to make this clear, the character does not keep the momentum, but the camera does, and then when you move again, this momentum is transferred back to the character. Really hard to explain, and even the footage doesn't really do it justice. You just kind of have to feel it for yourself. Stealth is the name of the game, but actually most of the time is not spent sneaking around guards. Out the entirety of my time playing the game, barely any of it was spent sneaking around. The majority was probably spent in cutscenes or codec calls, which are lengthy. I counted the time between me killing 3 Metal Gear Rays and fighting Solidus was about 30 to 45 minutes, and then after I did that I spent a further 20 minutes watching the whole ending. The cutscenes at times do get a little intrusive, especially when I watch a cutscene that tells me what I need to do, and then a second later I receive a codec call that relays all the same information again. The problem turns up when this happens, but then other sections to the game just leave you completely in the dark. For example, I was told multiple times that I had to use a disguise to trick the cameras and guards to get into the Shell 1 core. Key part of this disguise being to find the AK-74U, as if I wasn't carrying one, the guards would see right through me because all guards in the core have an AK. I was informed of this by cutscene and by Snake over codec when I grabbed the AK, but the game didn't inform me on the fact that I was to make my way to the bridge in the tanker mission at the beginning. I was told by codec and cutscene that the Metal Gear would be housed in the lower parts of the ship, so I looked around for a way to gain access to the lower levels when the entire time I was meant to head to the bridge so that I could fight Olga before heading into the lower levels. And this is at the beginning of the game, when the player has the least understanding of the plot, controls, map layout, and so on. The game can't seem to decide whether it wants to hold your hand and guide you through a tightly told story, or leave you out to dry to figure it out yourself. Sticking on cutscenes a little bit longer, I love the presentation. Some of the scenes genuinely felt like I was watching a film, especially both of the openings to each chapter. The opening to the tanker chapter with Snake jumping from the bridge is one of the best shots I've ever seen in a game. The lighting, shots, how the camera moves, I love it. Codec calls have changed since 1. In the first game the characters were represented with illustrations that gave a lot more detail than what the PS1 models could have offered, but here in MGS2, 3D models are used, which helps to keep the codec calls more interesting, as you can see the characters talking, rather than having a drawing that flips between 2 frames. It's an upgrade for sure, and helped keep me more interested in the lengthy conversations. After a lengthy conversation, a boss fight is certainly welcome, so it's a shame that a lot of them fall short for me of being a good fight. I like them fine enough, but it's clear that this game was built around its stealth mechanics and that this was the primary focus of the in-game systems, because whenever it tries to be all-out action, it feels really clunky and certainly nowhere near as smooth as the rest of the play experience. I think some of these are a bit clunky by design, depending on your reading of the game's meta-narrative, but from the gameplay standpoint, they're not good. A lot of my issues with them comes from the controls. The game is obviously built as a stealth game first and foremost, so sneaking around, moving, and slow methodical play feel great. But whenever the game has to drop you into combat, it gets rough. Shooting in third person might as well be based on a dice roll, because whether or not you hit your targets is really difficult to tell beforehand. So to combat this, you have to go into first person, which means you can't move or dodge attacks. The fight that suffers the most from this is the Harrier fight, since it is so ridiculously fast and aiming and locking on with the stinger is clunky, so the fight ends up a bit of a mess for me personally. Plus, the members of Dead Cell don't have much of personality in their fights. Fat Man probably has the most, and his fight is actually the one I enjoy the most, with you having to not just try and fight him, but also defuse the bombs he plants as he skates around the arena. After defeating him, you even have to defuse a massive bomb planted underneath himself, which is a cool panic moment when you thought you were in the clear. Fortune is super one note and just constantly talks about not being able to die, wanting to die, and blaming her father for not being able to die. You notice the theme here? She doesn't even get a winnable fight. The fight you have with her is just a challenge in dodging and hiding behind cover for a few minutes, and Snake fights her off screen later in the game before she dies at the hands of Ocelot. Vamp isn't super interesting either. He's a guy with vampire powers like drinking blood, being able to recover from injuries, running on water and up walls? And his fight isn't much better. He swims in water for a while before jumping out and throwing knives at you or planting claymores around. This is the fight that has the biggest problem with the first and third person switching, because Vamp jumps to the upper levels that require you to switch into first person to hit him, but when he jumps down to your level super quickly, you need to try and change where you're aiming, but aiming isn't exactly quick, so it could lead to frustration. This is not me saying I hate these boss fights, by the way. I did enjoy them as I played them. It's just really clear that this isn't what the game was built for. Funnily enough, the best boss fight in the game is actually the last one because of how it's built to complete Raiden's character arc and controls entirely differently from every other fight. Solidus has by far the best fight because it's built around the use of the sword Raiden gains in Arsenal gear. It's fully in third person and uses the unique control style of the sword that has been made for this game specifically, and not the holdover control style built specifically for stealth. I've been dancing my way around the story up to this point because that is what you'll play the game for. Also because the ending gets quite confusing, and I'll try my best to make sense of it here and give you my interpretation of the events as I believe they occurred. The game begins with Snake and Otacon infiltrating a Navy ship said to be transporting a new Metal Gear. The two have separated from Foxhound and have formed their own organisation called Philanthropy, an NGO for taking out Metal Gears. Snake is not alone, however, as Russian soldiers, commanded by a man called Gurlukovich, take over the ship and intend to steal Metal Gear for themselves. Unknown to Snake for now is that they are also being assisted by Ocelot from MGS1. Snake has to snap some pictures so that he and Otacon can expose the military's use of Metal Gear Ray. Before he gets to the hangar, he has a brief scuffle with Gurlukovich's daughter Olga, who is pregnant at the time. Snake makes his way into the hangar, but after the pictures are sent, Gurlukovich and Ocelot spring, and Ocelot guns down his own men and Gurlukovich and steals Ray for the Patriots before sinking the tanker, but not before acting like Liquid for a moment from the first game. He snaps a few pictures and fools the world into blaming the entire thing on Solid Snake. It's at this point that Snake is believed to be dead. 2 years go by and we open to Colonel Campbell of MGS1 telling Snake that he has to infiltrate an offshore facility, cleaning up the oil spilled from the tanker, Big Shell, because a terrorist unit called Dead Cell have hijacked it and taken the President of the United States hostage and are demanding $30 billion for his release, apparently led by Solid Snake. Our Snake sounds a little off in this cutscene though, with his voice and demeanour not matching the man we've come to know. As he enters Big Shell, it becomes clear that someone else has broken into this facility as well, someone bearing a stark resemblance to Solid Snake. maybe we're dealing with another clone. I mean, we dealt with Liquid in the last game, so it could be possible. As we make our way up the elevator, we take off our mask and it's revealed that we're not playing as Solid Snake, but a blonde man named Jack, who will be referred to as Raiden for the remainder of this game and this video. Raiden's handlers for the mission are the Colonel, as mentioned before, but also his girlfriend Rose, who overall doesn't play a massive role until the end, with her more just offering emotional support throughout the mission. Kind of. More on that later. Raiden makes his way through Shell 1 and runs into Vamp as he tears through Navy soldiers that were used as a distraction for Raiden. Vamp nearly gets the drop on him, but he's shot by a man called Iroquois Pliskin, who we will team up with for the rest of the game. And yes, Pliskin is exactly who you think he is, but Raiden doesn't know that for now. It's revealed that Raiden has minimal field experience and has been trained almost entirely in VR. More specifically, the VR missions that were released as a separate game from the original Metal Gear Solid. We hear on Pliskin's radio that some soldiers are being mowed down by Fortune, and we see her powers in full effect as all incoming bullets just sail right past her, and Vamp shows up to take the President into the core of Shell 1 while she destroys the connecting bridge. We are informed that the big shell has had C4 planted all across it, and we team up with Pliskin and NYPD bomb specialist Peter Stillman to go and defuse them all. Something is off about how they are planted, and Stillman discovers a huge bomb at the bottom of Shell 2, which is triggered after all the other C4 are defused, and we need to rush all the way back to the first room of the chapter to defuse the one at the bottom of Shell 1. Peter Stillman is unfortunately killed in the explosion. This makes some of Shell 2 inaccessible to us, but for now we continue to try and find the President. Before we head up the elevator, we have the boss fight with Fortune, after which we make our way to the heliport to fight Fat Man, as he appears to go rogue from the rest of Dead Cell. A ninja appears before us who looks remarkably similar to Grey Fox, who gives us an enemy uniform in order for us to sneak into the Shell 1 core to speak to a Secret Service agent, Ames, who should know where the President is. So we infiltrate the core and grab a directional microphone to track Ames as he has a pacemaker. There's a section here where we need to use a grab move in order to use the guard's eyes to get into the room with the hostages, but the game never taught me how to use the move, so I was stuck here for a little while. We get to Ames and he tells us that the President is in the Shell 2 core, as well as revealing that the terrorists have access to nuclear weapons, using the President as an unlock code, but there needs to be another login made 1 hour later to confirm, so now we are on a countdown to save him. He also tells us that the big shell has nothing to do with oil cleanup, but is instead for the production of another new Metal Gear. The man claiming to be Solid Snake appears with Ocelot and we listen in on their conversation. Ames once again contradicts what we've been told, as apparently no ransom demand for the President was ever made, but the nuclear strike was the goal the whole time, to launch a nuke over Manhattan to act as an EMP and isolate it from the rest of the world to be rebuilt with their aims in mind. Ames gives us a level 3 security card before Ocelot enters the room. Ames dies of a heart attack, our disguise is ripped from us, and the ninja comes back to save us and aid our escape. We make our way over to Shell 2 while Pliskin and Otacon go to help hostages on Shell 1, but we are interrupted by the man claiming to be Snake, which Pliskin doesn't take too kindly to.
No, that is not Solid Snake!
A Harrier shows up and we have another boss fight, after which it is finally revealed to Raiden that Pliskin is in fact Solid Snake, and the man we have spoken to is Solidus Snake. This starts to go into series lore, but a brief explanation is that there was a legendary perfect soldier called Big Boss, who went rogue from the United States government, but from a single strand of his hair, the government created a number of clones: Liquid Snake, Solid Snake, and Solidus Snake. These three are all genetic clones of Big Boss, which explains why Snake is such a good soldier. There's a whole load of lore behind all of this, but that's all we need to know for now, as a lot of this will be covered in later videos. We don't quite defeat Solidus yet, as he's saved by Ray after losing his left eye, and we continue on to Shell 2 to save the President. We finally get to the President, and he tells us that he was actually working with the terrorists to begin with, but now has had a change of heart. He wanted to gain power and become a member of the Patriots, but now he has been denied that request after giving them what they want. I guess I should probably explain what the Patriots are. More series lore again. The Patriots are a group of unknown individuals who are basically an Illuminati who control everything. They're an omnipresent force in the Metal Gear Solid series who orchestrate many different events throughout the whole series, and they're essentially the biggest bad to take down by the time that MGS4 rolls around at the end of the chronological timeline. MGS lore is a fucking mess. Solidus wants to challenge and take down the Patriots by using the latest Metal Gear, Arsenal Gear. Arsenal Gear is a massive ship that is meant to be an impenetrable shield, stocked with thousands of nuclear warheads and mass-produced Metal Gear rays to fire them, with full access to the US military's internal system. After revealing all of this, the President is shot by Revolver Ocelot, and as a last request, he asks us to seek help from Emma Emmerich, Otacon's sister, to upload a virus and stop Arsenal Gear. Snake knew about Arsenal Gear since we took out Fat Man, and the Colonel doesn't even know about the Patriots. Along with what Ames said, the Colonel and Rose are starting to look a little suspicious. We make our way to the B1 of Shell 2's core and fight Vamp before swimming to reach Emma. We talk to her and convince her to get on board with helping, but she has a fear of water. So we have to help her by having her cling to us as we swim back to the elevator. This section's probably the weakest in the whole game for two main reasons. First of all is that it's a swimming level with weird slippery controls that, like the combat, the game isn't built for. This wouldn't be too bad on its own, but then add that we have to escort Emma through this with her having a pitiful amount of oxygen, meaning you have to dive and resurface constantly, and this section can be a bit of a ball ache. It's certainly not bad as far as escort/water levels go, since it's short and isn't a major part of events. It's more of a footnote really in the grand scheme of the game's story, but it would potentially turn people off from replays. The next section though is inexcusable, where we have to drag, and I do mean drag, Emma behind us while we make our way to Strut L so that we can make it back to Shell 1. My other main problem with this whole area of the game is that Emma's character is not awfully interesting. She has so much dialogue with Raiden to establish her smarts, but nothing that actually endears me to her character because she's just been introduced for the sake of the plot. Emma made a virus that could take down the AI that powers Arsenal Gear, GW. I'll talk about this AI more later, but stick a pin in it for now. Emma has to walk across pipes in order to get to Shell 1, and Raiden, with the help of Snake, has to cover her, taking out guards and ciphers along the way, but before she gets to the end, Vamp shows up again and holds her hostage. We shoot him, but not before Emma's fatally stabbed. Raiden makes his way back to Shell 1 core, just in time for Emma to bleed out in Otacon's arms as the virus is uploaded into GW. We're not sure if the virus uploaded though, and have to find a way onto Arsenal Gear to make sure. Emma's death didn't really affect me, and the scene with Otacon afterwards keeps changing tone so quickly that it kinda took me out of the story. He's inconsolable as she dies in his arms, and in the next scene he's ready to go on the mission again, and 2 seconds later he goes back to inconsolable. If this scene hadn't switched between these moods so rapidly, I think it would have made it a little bit more effective. Plus, the relationship that Otacon and Emma had as kids is really fucking weird and creeped me out a little bit, so that also contributed to me being taken out of the moment. So Arsenal Gear is about to take off, and the ninja shows up again and is revealed to be Olga from the opening. She was working with Snake the whole time. She and Snake seem to betray Raiden, leading to him being captured by Solidus and Ocelot and being taken aboard Arsenal Gear. Raiden is stripped of all equipment and clothes for some reason, before it's revealed that he was a child soldier trained for warfare, and was taken under Solidus's wing. Ocelot remarks about the whole situation of this game being very nostalgic to him. Stick a pin in that too. Olga provides us with the means to escape, revealing that the Patriots are holding her child hostage unless she works for them to disrupt Solidus's plans by assisting Raiden. This planted some seeds in my head about what our real mission is, but I'll get to talk about that soon. Our goal for now is to meet Snake in a hangar, and Olga releases our restraints and we have to make it to the hangar completely naked. This is the point where the game goes a little off the rails and the themes become very prominent, and where after a night of playing the game so long that my eyes were starting to glaze over, that I got completely and utterly fucking lost in the game's ludicrously long codec calls and deconstructing what was and wasn't real, or who was and wasn't real. I'll try my best to keep it straight, but I make no promises, and also, if I get some of this slightly wrong, I do apologise, but this is my interpretation of what happened from this point onwards. Raiden tells Rose about his being a child soldier, and she says that he should have told her, and he realises he was chosen for this mission because of his relationship to Solidus, and he decides it's best that he doesn't see Rose anymore. The Colonel in the next room starts spouting weird meta lines to Raiden that sound as if he's addressing the player directly, noting that we're playing a game and a role within it, tells us to turn off the game console, even Rose tells us to back away from the TV, and the Colonel's voice starts to glitch out. He shows us footage and starts spouting the briefing for the original Metal Gear game to Raiden and all other types of nonsensical lines. Computer code covers the walls. It's all very strange and creepy, and there's nothing we can do to get away from it as we are stuck in a corridor. Rose reveals that she's been an agent for the Patriots, designed to be the perfect girlfriend for Raiden, and the last 2 years has been part of the Patriots keeping an eye on him. But she has fallen in love with him since then, and says she's pregnant before hanging up. Snake finally appears in full glory before Raiden. We get our equipment from him along with a new piece of kit, a sword. The sword controls completely differently from everything else in the game, using the right stick to choose how we slash through enemies and in what way the blade will move. I really like it as it finally asserts Raiden as his own character instead of trying to be like Solid Snake. Snake and Raiden start to infiltrate Arsenal Gear. Snake used us as bait so that we could sneak in, and he starts to impart the game's main theme onto Raiden. I can't say it any better than the man himself, so I'll let him do the talking.
Find something to believe in, and find it for yourself. And when you do, pass it on to the future.
Believe in what?
That's your problem.
Now we fight alongside Snake and find out that the Colonel wasn't real, but instead generated from Raiden's head. Fortune shows up and we leave Snake to fight her before Raiden has to take on several Metal Gear Rays in a weird VR type room. Personally, this section didn't sit right with me. It's always been established that the Metal Gears are the most capable and powerful weapons in the whole series, and here's Raiden taking on several of them at once, something that not even Snake or Big Boss have done, despite them being hailed as way better soldiers. Olga sacrifices herself so that we can escape this room, and the GW virus takes its effect and shuts down not only the Metal Gears, but also sends Arsenal's system haywire. Snake and Raiden are captured once again. Solidus' whole plan was to use Arsenal Gear to gain the names of the Patriots so that he could kill them. He reveals GW's purpose was to filter information flow to cut out anything that the Patriots didn't like or would lead to a loss of their power, so that they could remain scheming behind the scenes. Included in this data are the names of the 12 founders of the Patriots. The virus we uploaded erased any information about the Patriots from GW, thus putting a stop to the plan. Ocelot reveals his true intentions here, that this whole scenario, including Solidus and everyone else, was all a part of a program designed to replicate Shadow Moses from MGS1. All the little details that have been similar, or in some cases identical, were all part of the Patriots' plan to turn otherwise ordinary soldiers into ideal ones, like Solid Snake, and Raiden was the subject to test if the system would work. Ocelot was never working for Solidus, but instead manipulating him into playing the role of Liquid. The only reason why the whole thing has gone haywire is because they didn't account for the interference of the real Solid Snake to steer the whole thing off course. On top of this, it's revealed that Fortune's powers are as a result of Ocelot as well, giving her a machine that curves bullets away before shooting her. He jumps into the original Metal Gear Ray and plans to kill us all. But then Fortune curves the missiles away from us, proving that she did have powers all along. She dies after this act. This death, like Emma, didn't really affect me either, as Fortune is just sort of a one-note character with not much depth. I don't really know why she was included at this pivotal moment in the plot. The twists here don't stop, as Liquid reveals that he has been alive this whole time inside the transplanted arm that was grafted onto Ocelot. He led Snake into this whole thing in order to free him so that he can destroy the Patriots. This is so fucking confusing and convoluted that I'm getting a headache just summarising it. Liquid Ocelot now leaves in Ray and leaves Raiden to deal with Solidus aboard Arsenal gear as it crashes into New York City. The game now talks about passing information on to the next generation, and Solidus wants humanity to have the choice of what gets passed down, instead of the Patriots choosing by way of digital censorship. We get a call from a fake Colonel and Rose that honestly goes entirely over my head on who the fuck it is that's telling us this. But they basically say that humanity shouldn't get to choose what gets passed on, as there is so much fake or incorrect information that gets passed down the generations, and instead a system like GW would allow future generations to see an objective view of history, rather than one filled with bias and slander and misinterpretations. The way they word it is that they don't want to control content, but create context. Honestly, this whole codec call confuses me, and it's at this point that I totally lose what the plot is even about. Whoever is talking to us tells us that we need to kill Solidus, otherwise Olga's child and Rose will die. And we accept, killing Solidus and putting an end to all of this. Snake talks to us at the end of this, and I'm just gonna let this conversation play out.
There's no such thing in the world as absolute reality. Most of what they call real is actually fiction. What you think you see is only as real as your brain tells you it is.
Then, what am I supposed to believe in? What am I going to leave behind when I'm through?
We can tell other people about having faith. What we had faith in. What we found important enough to fight for. It's not whether you were right or wrong, but how much faith you were willing to have. That decides the future. The Patriots are a kind of ongoing fiction too, come to think of it. Listen, don't obsess over words so much. Find the meaning behind the words, then decide. You can find your own name. And your own future.
Decide for myself?
And whatever you choose will be you.
I don't know if I can.
I know you didn't have much in terms of choices this time. But everything you felt, thought about during this mission is yours. And what you decide to do with them is your choice.
You mean start over?
Yeah, a clean slate, a new name, new memories. Choose your own legacy. It's for you to decide. It's up to you.
After this, Raiden takes off dog tags with the player's name on them and throws them away, deciding to make his own way in the world, and finally sees Rose deciding to stay with her and their unborn kid. After the credits, Snake speaks to us again, and there's a dangling plot thread left open about Otacon and Snake finding out the names of the Patriots, but they're already dead. And they've been dead for 100 years. And that finally concludes the story section of this video. Sorry for it being so long, but there's a lot to talk about in terms of the events and motivations of characters, especially in the ending. I really enjoyed this story a lot more than I did in MGS1 up until the ending, where I got so confused that the whole thing became a mindfuck and it lost me entirely, with unclear motivations and twist after twist muddying the waters even more. Personally, I think that the codec call with the fake Colonel at the end is where it completely falls off for me, as the game gets so bogged down in the themes that if you don't get them immediately, then there's almost nothing for you to enjoy from that point forward, as the literal narrative just sort of stops. I think if the game had made it a little more clear who was orchestrating what events at that point, it would have been easier. Am I talking to the Patriots? Has GW become sentient? Is it a third party that we've never fucking met? I don't know. And sadly it brings this part of the game down for me. But that's not the end of the journey, as there are bonus modes to talk about, and these won't take too long. Snake Tales is an alternate take on the campaign without cutscenes or codec calls from the perspective of Solid Snake going through the big shell. This is really just here for those who want to play as Solid Snake and not Raiden, and I think it's a little bit lazy. Take the same map from the main campaign, make the player read a story summary, and then remove the radar to give the player an extra challenge and knock off early. This could have been really cool to clear up some of the messier parts of the story and show what happened from the eyes of Solid Snake throughout the main plot events. There are also VR missions that are a fun challenge to undertake if you want more of any particular kind of gameplay that is presented to you throughout playing MGS2. I don't pay too much attention to these, as they're not what I play MGS for. And that is how I fell in love with Metal Gear Solid 2. I know the ending to this video was a little bit more negative, but I really did enjoy my time with this game, and it has made me want to play the other games in the series to see if I can finally enjoy the games that I have wanted to enjoy for such a long time. Metal Gear used to be a series that I thought was silly or dumb, and that Kojima was pretentious and trying too hard to be different, and while I still don't agree with everything he says about games, I do think that at the very least this series is one that I could learn to enjoy as I play more. I highly recommend that you play this game, and you're not short of options. The recent Master Collection on all modern consoles and the PC, the HD Collection on the Xbox 360 or PS3, or even the original back on PS2, as it still holds up. Although, if you're going to play the PS2, maybe get the Substance version to get the maximum amount of content possible. I hope that you enjoyed this look into my journey of learning to enjoy Metal Gear Solid through the second entry. It's been a hell of a time, and I'll see you all later. Bye. Hello everyone, and welcome to the post-ending ramble. I hope you all enjoyed this video about Metal Gear Solid 2. I had a really fun time making this one, and filming it and everything, and doing the research, playing the game. I really enjoyed it, and I hope that came through in the video, that I really do love this game, and also now this series as an extension. Because by the time that you are seeing this video, I've already made my way through all the way to MGS4 and played a little bit of MGS5 Ground Zeroes as well. So there are videos coming up about all of them. The next one will be MGS3, but then I think after that I'll take a short break and cover something else. And then I'll come back and do MGS4. So I'm not giving up on those videos, but I'm just going to take a little break from them once MGS3 is done. Because the MGS4, I'm suffering from like a lot of writer's block. You know, because you talk about the same games and the same like general framework that goes into them, and eventually you will start to hit a sort of brick wall with describing them. In trying to do it in interesting ways and stuff like that. But also during the production of this video, we hit 500 subscribers, which I think upon this release is probably around about a month ago. But yeah, I absolutely, like, I can't believe it, that we're at the 500 mark. You know, never in my life did I think I would get there, and I cannot thank you all enough for it. Yeah, it's amazing. At the time I'm recording this, I hit 500 maybe like a day or two ago, and I'm still struggling to wrap my head around it, because it's just incredible. And also the fact that, like, you know, the videos have been doing pretty good recently, like Bioshock and stuff like that got a really good response, and I'm happy that you guys are enjoying what I'm making. Also, I was contemplating changing a couple things to do with the channel, but I'll do a proper update video about that will be released shortly after this one. That I'll set that to go out. Just that I want to change a couple things that I talk about on here, switch up a couple formats maybe. Nothing's going away, don't worry, it's all fine, and it will still remain, for the most part, gaming focused, but I just want to expand a little bit, and I'll talk about that in a different video, because, let's be honest, the majority of people are not going to sit here and listen to me ramble about things. So yeah, I'll do a little channel update after this video goes out. So I'm gonna let you all go now because I've talked for long enough, and I'll see you all next time. Bye.